I'm with Watershed Protection and the Grow Green program. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We would love to be in person, but obviously when we were setting this up, that was not possible. So we are here today to how to grow green to keep our water clean. You can see we've got 4 speakers today, each giving 15 minutes, and then we've set it up so we have Katie and Cassie are collecting your questions in the chat during the talks, and then we're going to save all the questions for the end. So if you want to leave at 1 o'clock, you can. If you want to stick around and have a conversation with all the speakers, then you are welcome to do that. Yeah, the speakers will be introducing themselves as we go along. And then also a huge high five to Cassie and Katie, these awesome people that are on our team that are, doing stuff in the background for us. So today my talk is about the top 10 practices to keep our water clean. But first, before we start, I just want you to close your eyes if you want to, but just when you close your eyes and you think of your favorite natural place in Austin, what comes to mind? If you want to share it in the chat, that would be wonderful. If you care to keep that private, that's okay. But I just wanted to point out a few of them that are my favorites, probably yours too. So we have the awesome Barton Springs. Austin wouldn't be Austin without it. The green belt could be any number of green belts, but that's probably the Barton Creek green belt. Then we have Lady Bird Lake, and we have McKinney Falls, and we can't leave out Lake Austin. And I'm sure that you guys have other favorites, but my point is we have lots of water here, and Watershed Protection's charge is to keep our water clean so we can have all this fun and enjoy it and have fun in Austin outside in the water. So you have your landscapes, and then I have this graphic here that shows all the different things that you can put on your landscape. It can be pesticides, it can be dog waste, whatever it is. When it rains, a lot of it gets washed down into the storm drains, and then guess what? Those lead straight down to our creeks. And so you put motor oil up there on that landscape, and it's going to end up in the creek. So we're going to try to avoid that. And that's what we're going to try to talk about today, things you can do in your landscape. So the first thing, number 1, start with a plan. We have these awesome resources that you can check out. You can draw your own little plan. I would suggest doing it to scale. If you need help, we have a list of Grow Green landscape professionals that you can talk to and hire. And I would suggest, treat them like any other contractor. But like you might get a garden coach who just comes out and walks through your landscape with you, and you pay them for a couple hours, and then you can take it from there. And then there's full scale, install the whole thing kind of places too. So please check that out. Keeping water on the land, catch it if you can. This is a big one for Watershed. We want to slow the water down any way we can. So the first thing is using cisterns and rain barrels and collecting it that way, so the water isn't just washing down just washing away basically down into the street. We also use rain gardens, and rain gardens are just a garden that's been dug out so the water can catch there and then soak down into the ground. So it's important where you place the rain garden that it can percolate down, and there's a little test you can do for that. But we don't want the water standing there. We don't have a mosquito issue, so we don't want the water to be in there more than a couple days and then still soak out. But we also, here's a rain garden that's being dug out, and then you can kind of see the idea after it's planted. It looks very much like a regular garden. You can also use this porous pavement on, I think, probably more practical on larger projects, but water actually penetrates that particular kind of pavement. And you've probably seen these little pavers, so the water can soak down in there. And then finally, you can't do this at home, but like this is in Stacy Park, and there's a curb cut. And so that water comes rushing down the side of the road, and it goes down into that rain garden. And then if you look in the back of that picture, there's a row of big muley. The engineers call that a vegetative filter strip, but what it really is also is a row of big muley. So once that water goes into the rain garden, then it flows down towards the creek, and the big muley helps slow it down. So you can actually, you can use that principle in your landscape too. So the next one, number 3, this shouldn't surprise anybody, make informed plant choices. You'll notice that our native and adapted plant guide is native and adapted plants, and we are all for using native plants whenever you possibly can. Plant wildflowers, but they aren't always available. And so like I said, we recommend them whenever you possibly can. But there are also some other plants that are adapted that do fine here that aren't taking over. So we kind of find the middle ground in the plant guide, but it's distinguished between native and adapted, so you can make up your own mind. But another type of plant we want you to avoid are the invasive species. I call them bullies of the plant world because they take over and choke out native vegetation. You can actually buy some of these in the nurseries because they're a plant that anybody can stick somewhere and it will do well. So if you're a nurseryman, that's a good thing. If you're an ecosystem, maybe not so much. So the other plants we'd like you to avoid are non-adapted. Like, I'm from the Midwest originally, and we had peonies and they were awesome, but you can't grow those here. If you want peonies, I would suggest getting a cut flower and having them in a vase on your table, because it just gets too hot here and they will not be happy. So another thing, number 4, plant and protect trees. Trees are the largest plant in your landscape. So if you have some, please take care of them. If you don't have any, then, I would consider planting some. You can shade your house, you can have windbreaks. I really want to point out this picture of the graphic with the tree roots, because a lot of people think trees are a mirror image of themselves underground. But most of the tree roots are really in the top 6 to 18 inches of soil. And that's really important because people walking on that, people driving on that, people parking on that packs the roots, and it's really bad for the tree. So ideally, if you mulch all the way out to the drip line where the branches go, like this one in Zilker Park, that's what the tree is going to prefer the most. If you need to hire an arborist, look for a certified ISA arborist. That's not to say there aren't arborists that aren't certified that are great. I would just, like any contractor, find out their background and their credentials and their experience. We also have, if you go to growgreen.org, there's a link there that shows you the oak wilt hotspots in Austin. This is very helpful if you're worried about the spread of oak wilt, because you can see exactly where it is. And then I just put that tree root graphic in there again as just a reminder how important the roots are. So soil, here are your 3 options. You can work with what you have, you can amend existing soil, or you can start fresh with the raised bed. So I gave an example here. This first one in the lower corner is, working with what you have. I think that was a really good idea to put those pots out there. It looks pretty nice. If you have a bed like this middle one that's full of clay and gunk, I would suggest, yes, adding some compost, but also consider some expanded shale. It's like clay marbles, and they don't break down like compost does, and it helps give some aeration to the soil. And then the final one are raised beds. Love raised beds. You can put in whatever soil mix that you want, and you can control it. So those are your 3 options when it comes to soil. Number 5, the long and short of it. Ditch the turf. Is that clever? Lawn care chemicals can cause a lot of problems in our water. Fertilizing is a big one. You guys, I'm sure you know about the harmful algae that's been in Lake Austin, and we are heartbroken that, some dogs have lost their lives. And my puppy's up there in the right hand corner, and, we want to do whatever we can to prevent people or pets from getting harmed by swimming in our creeks. So if you want to find out more about it, you can go to the page. It's there on the bottom, but you can also do a search for City of Austin watershed algae, and it will come up. But what we're saying is people and pets should avoid swimming in areas with algae or water that's warm or has scum or film. It can return, and this isn't just a problem here in Austin. This is a problem all over the place. So fertilizer helps contribute to that algae growth. So we're saying, don't be unwise about how you use fertilizer. So you never should apply it before a rain. Also, weed and feed products, those are a combination of fertilizer and pre-emergent herbicide. Not a good thing for our creeks. Again, cause algae problems. If your neighbor puts weed and feed on their landscape and those tree roots go over to the other property, it can take it up and damage your tree. And this happens. Talk to some arborists in Austin. They get calls every spring because it happens pretty quickly. And then also you can track this stuff in either on your feet or your paws if you're a furry one. And then, so what we suggest, instead of fertilizing, I love this graphic because you can aerate the turf and top dress it with with compost. So you want to use one of these core aerators, and it's like a rototiller, but you run it over your landscape and it pulls out these plugs. You put compost on it, and this is how it looked before. See how that soil's all compacted? But once you get those plugs pulled out and you get some compost and some air, look at those roots. They are so happy. Those roots are going to be so much happier and do so much well when we have challenging conditions. So instead of putting salt-based quick release fertilizer on your landscape, do this. And I know the rebate title has changed, Chris. Chris Charles, our last speaker, is going to tell you about some rebates that you can get if you choose to do this, because this helps with water conservation too. Okay, so properly diagnosing plant problems. I think the big message here is that a lot of problems in landscapes are caused by things that aren't living, so it's air pollution or it's drought or it's freeze. When you have a problem that's living, like a fungus on some kind of living thing, you want to make sure you identify it correctly. Hopefully you don't need to treat it, but if you do, you want to make sure you use the right active ingredient and the least toxic way to manage it. Hopefully that's not a pesticide. Encourage beneficial insects by not using pesticides. Again, use the chemicals as a last resort. There's a wide range of toxicity from Safer's insecticidal soap all the way up to DDT. So keep that in mind. Sometimes we do need to use something. And the active ingredient is what makes something toxic or not. So, and if you need help diagnosing plant problems, you can check with the Travis County Master Gardeners, who are our partners, and you can also check with Grow Green, and we will be happy to help you try to figure out what is going wrong in your landscape. Again, Chris Charles is our last speaker today. He's with Austin Water, and they have the job of making sure we have water, where Watershed focuses a little more on keeping it clean. So if you need any information about sprinklers or low flow toilets, it's not just inside, it's also outside watering. Be getting in touch with waterwiseaustin.org. And just a quick one on the mulching. I showed you that picture earlier of that big tree in Zilker, but I also wanted to show you a close-up. This is a mountain laurel that was mulched. In that middle picture, you can see the mulch is up against the base of that woody stem. And if you have that in your landscape, just go out there and pull it like away from the base of the woody part of the plant. Because if you leave that in there and it gets moist, then it can rot the outer bark of the tree and then cause problems. Okay, I'm almost there. Hot cities aren't cool. This is just, we try to discourage people from doing all these rocky landscapes, use trellises, use green walls to keep things cool. And the final one I just want to mention is about knowing your wildfire risk. If you talk to these awesome folks at the Wildfire Division, they will tell you wildfires occurring in Central Texas is not a matter of if, it's when. We need to be prepared. They have this awesome interactive website. You can put your address in, you can find out the risk for your property, and then in doing so, also figure out ways that you can protect your property by using defensible space, which is creating an area around your landscape that doesn't have as many plants, acts as a fire break if the fire comes through. I think you'll find these guys and gals are just awesome and wonderful about, and they'll even work with the whole neighborhood if you want to. I just want to go back to all these awesome places in Austin and ask you to help us keep them clean and take care of them and cherish them as we should. If you have questions, you can check out growgreen.org. You can call us. You can email us. We are happy to help. I am going to end here. Look at this. 13 seconds left. Speaker contact information. That's not my butterfly bike. I wish it was. Yeah, we had that at Zilker Park. And then I went to this awesome festival at Zilker last weekend. Oh, look, my time's up.
Denise, you gave us so many resources that I didn't even know about. And I apologize, y'all might hear some odd birds squawking in the background that had to move because the tree crews down the road arrived. So hopefully you can hear me well. And I look forward to sharing with you guys about my favorite topic. My name is Paige Oliverio. I'm with the Raincatcher pilot program. That's a partnership with the city's watershed department and Austin Water Utility, as well as some other parts of the city, rolling out some programs to help people who want to catch rain, catch more, and learn about catching rain on your properties. I'm not here to talk about that today. I'm here to talk about rain. Creeks, rain, and getting people connected to nature, again, are one of my favorite topics. So thanks for listening. First of all, rainwater. Catching rainwater on your property and throughout the city replicates the water cycle. So what has happened when we build cities, as you can see in this diagram, it's got lots of topography, there's low areas, there's high areas, there's trees, there's open spaces with grasslands that are made to draw water and nutrients down into the soil. And then parts of the water cycle that a lot of times we forget to talk about are some of the unseen ones, like infiltration into the soil, percolation into the soil, how water moves laterally through the soil to get back to the creeks and then get into our groundwater again. So we fill up our aquifers again if we're drawing water into the soil and down deep. And then also transpiration as part of the water cycle is when the trees are growing healthy and they're letting water go from their leaves. That's an important cooling aspect of the water cycle. And when we don't have enough trees in a region, especially when we are adding concrete to a region, in addition to not planting enough trees, we cut out that transpiration part of the cycle. And then when we add concrete in our cities, we're cutting out the infiltration part of our cycle, and we're cutting out the percolation part of our cycle. All of those are really important for healthy soil, for cool air, and for a replication of the water cycles. A lot of times people will notice that weather patterns shift right when they show up at Austin. They go around and then they keep moving. And a lot of that's affected by the heat island that we've created in our cities with a lot of concrete and with not having enough trees planted and with our water just running off straight into the creeks instead of soaking in. So that's a really, really important part of catching rain. Rain, a lot of people don't know it, but rain contains a lot of nutrients. It picks up nutrients in the air. A lot of people don't know that you can actually infuse nitrogen into your rainwater in the sky when there's lightning. It's kind of a really special, cool thing about the weather patterns. And when a thunderstorm comes through and there's lightning, is that power, that energy from the lightning reacts, and all this stuff's going on in the air, and it actually infuses nitrogen into your rain. And so then when your rain lands on your landscaping, it's giving that nitrogen back to the plants and back to the soil. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, after a rainfall, the plants look kind of greener and happier and perkier. And it's not just because they got wet, but it's because they've been infused with more nutrients. Yeah, they got washed off, and so they're a little bit less dusty, but all these other things are going on at the soil level and behind the scenes. Here's another concept of what's happening that's an unseen system. A lot of times we just don't know what's going on under the soil level, like what's going on in the ground. When you do things like put rainwater onto your landscaping or put water out on your landscaping in an extended period of time instead of all at once, and when you have plants that are different than your regular grass lawn, when you have plants that have deep, deep roots, those draw rainwater down into the soil. They help condition the soil. They help feed the microorganisms that are down there. And then those microorganisms in turn help feed your plants. So if you've got a healthy ecosystem supported by rainwater and supported by rainwater over time, you're building up a bunch of the unseen parts of your ecosystem that you don't know are there, but they're working really hard for you. Another thing that catching rain helps with is it reduces runoff that contains pollutants. Now, it's really easy to think of pollutants like gas that's dripped from your car, or oils, or, like the picture on the right where you see the oils running down the street and into the storm drain. Those are really visible, obvious pollutants. But people don't think about things like just straight sediment as being a pollutant. If you don't have nice rooted plants in your landscaping and healthy soil, every time it rains, that soil runs off into the storm drain. And all those little particles of mud and dirt and silt and grass clippings and all of that stuff, those are pollutants too. And those have an impact on our creeks and on our water ecosystem. They can clog up the water where the oxygen isn't able to move freely. The plants suffer, the fish and the turtles suffer, and all of that ends up washing down and down and down into the system. So sediment is a big pollutant that we don't talk about, but we can manage things like that when we're catching rain, either in cisterns and then letting it out slowly on our properties, or catching rain in things like rain gardens, where all that sediment collects into the rain garden space. And then the same thing with nitrogen, too much nitrogen coming from the form of like stuff that comes off your roof, Mr. Pigeon. That can also add too much nutrient load to our creeks. So if we're keeping our fertilizers, hopefully our organic fertilizers, on our properties, and if we're catching the stuff that comes off of our rooftops before it's able to flush into the storm drain and down into our creeks, we're benefiting not only our own properties, but properties adjacent and the creeks down the stream. Catching rain supports wildlife and plants during drought. So one of the things that happens, and I'm sure everybody here has experienced it at least once, is we have to go through drought stages where sometimes we're asked to stop watering our lawns with city water, or we're asked to turn off fountains until we're at a different stage where there's more water abundance. Well, if you're catching rain on your property, when we're in those cycles where we shouldn't be using a lot of city water because we need to preserve that in our lake system and preserve that for water consumption, we can still support our ecosystem and support the wildlife with the rain that we've caught in our cisterns. And we can also support it by already having supported really healthy plant life on our properties in the first place, because during a drought, really healthy plants are going to last through those droughts longer than plants that are suffering. And so if you're doing work up front to make sure that our soil is healthy and that our trees and our plants are healthy, they're going to be tough during those drought periods where you're going to see other plants fail a lot of times. And the same thing with winter storms. You know, we can build a resilient ecosystem and build resilient plants that can weather some of these storms better than what we've seen. There are ways that, like, you can use rainwater in your cisterns to support. I don't know if y'all can see the little blue dot on my picture. I'm hovering over the beautiful little butterfly bubbler that's sitting there. You can run drippers to little habitats like butterfly puddles and help support birds. And that can also drip slowly off into your landscaping through very simple drip irrigation lines that you can install yourself or get help from a contractor if you're feeling daunted. And then also you can support the future trees that you're going to need to plant on your property that are going to take place of some of your older trees. Those, you know, just one 250-gallon cistern with a little bubbler dialed in at the right dial to support a tree can get a new tree through a summer drought. A little bit more water, even better. But just think about that, like 250 gallons isn't a lot. And it goes a long way to support the foundation of a new tree in your yard. And then that tree is going to grow up really strong and healthy. Another thing that catching rainwater does is it benefits not only, it can help you a little bit with erosion on your own property, but it also has implications down the line, just like catching and hanging on to pollutants and letting those soak into the soil, slowing the rainwater down before it leaves your property. And if you can contain it and let it soak in, even better. It helps reduce the urban impact on our creeks. In previous infrastructure in cities, a lot of times, and you'll see this in one of the creeks that we're working nearby right now, it's called channelizing. And the city engineers in decades past went through creeks that there was a lot of erosion and they just concrete banked the sides of those creeks. And we're finding that's a practice that we don't want to do anymore. That's not a natural way to manage water in an ecosystem that's healthy. So what we want to do instead is we want to have that water move slowly across the land, soak in if possible. And you can make these features really beautiful on your property. And so that adds not only beauty, but function. Last but not least, hanging on to some water on your property helps extend water and water security in times of emergency. And I know we've all experienced now a couple of winter storms where water in the city system was cut off, but we really needed to flush those toilets, and we really needed to give pets some water, and we really needed to have access to water while we were waiting for the infrastructure to come back online, or while we were waiting for support services to make it to our streets. And so water security is a big topic, especially in Central Texas, where we have volatile weather. You know, we're going to have extreme winters, we're going to have extreme droughts, we're going to have extreme floods, and those are going to impact our relationship with water and our need for water. So if we have a little bit of it on our own properties, we can have that in those times of need, and we can share it with our neighbors. So it builds community in that way too. There's so many other things I could say about rainwater, but there's also a Q&A session, and I do a lot better when people ask me what's on their mind instead of me just yammering on. So I will see you guys at the Q&A.
So my name is Tiaga Raja, or Tiaga for short. and I created a company with my partner Gunjan Mittal called Sustainable Humane Earth. And my segment is supposed to be a DIY talk. Because of that, I'm going to say the word permaculture a lot, because permaculture includes anything you can think of DIY, because DIY to me and us means upcycling. So I'll be talking a lot about that, and less about how we did it and more about what we did. So it's more inspirational within 15 minutes. Even defining the term permaculture can't be done in 15 minutes, so I'm going to do the best that I can. Specific to rain, in our tradition, which also hails from ancient Sanskrit tradition, we identify water as a goddess. So it's Mother Earth. That's the goddess energy. So we identify water as goddess. So when I was approached by Paige to do a project, I always approach it with a very formal attitude of Sanskrit-based learning. So we called it Shri, which is the name of goddess Lakshmi in Sanskrit. And I identified it as spiraling rain integration, because what we're doing has a permaculture twist, and that permaculture twist is always thought of in spiral. Shri, because it is a wealth producing goddess, that means anywhere and everywhere that it will be, nature will flourish. The natural aspects of nature will flourish. So we incorporate that into our designs. And in permaculture, we mimic patterns found in nature. So my original pattern here is a spiral, and this is coming off of a rainwater catchment. So instead of rows, I'm thinking in a circle. And you don't want to walk into a circle mandala or a circular pattern to get to the center every time. So then I used a permaculture design pattern to cut in walkways in the 4 cardinal directions. And those walkways are filled with rocks like a bioswale, like Paige had showed you, and the middle is a swale, and the 2 side portions are your growing mounds, and it spirals all the way around to the center, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. And a spiral pattern also creates microclimates. One side will have more sun than the other, one side will have a different height than the other, and you can work with that as far as your plant choices, and it just adds an entire other dimension to your food forest. So as I said, I prefer to call it upcycling rather than DIY, because usually that means that it's going to look ugly if you're not a trained professional, but it can look extremely beautiful. And this was the original design as it was when it was installed. It's changed a little bit, and you can see it's quite a small house in Austin. And I just specifically wanted to talk about the rainwater catchment, and it's right here, if everyone can see my cursor. We have total on the property about 700 gallons of rainwater catch. There's 2 on this side that are stacked and another one on the other side. And we maxed out the amount that we were allotted for this size roof. We could have gone more. I could have built in-ground cisterns and all kinds of things, but basically we were told that it wouldn't fill up all those systems, and that's an accurate assessment. So it was almost overbuilt. And so what you have here is a first flush, and that first flush is also connected to the swale. And then we have an overflow. And then we also have where the actual rainwater comes out and percolates into the system, similar to the drip lines that Paige was showing, and they spiral all the way through the system. This is also known as a crater garden, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Actually, the homeowner, this is what it's really great in working with a homeowner that's skilled and really cares about what we're doing. They actually built this beautiful frame around the upcycled IBC totes. And I do want to mention that even though you're doing DIY, it doesn't mean that you have to do everything at the lowest cost possible, because usually the lowest quality will come in return. So after doing this project, I'm 100% certain that I will never use an IBC tote again for the way that we had to manufacture it and manipulate it to get it to work. In the future, I will always be purchasing manufactured rain barrels. They can be found anywhere these days, so they are very common, and they work permanently. And permaculture means that we do want certain aspects to work permanently and don't want to have to go back again and again to fix them. However, we did eventually get this to work, and it is full on a regular basis, and it's feeding a drip line with all of these beautiful plants. Now, when a spiral becomes a square, some folks just can't think in spirals and they end up wanting to change it to some sort of a linear fashion. And I know why this was done. It was mainly because Bermuda grass started taking over a spiral design and it had to be changed. And then a lot of fabric was put down in different ways that I wouldn't have necessarily done it. However, my original design had a wicking bed in it, and this is something that could end up changing this rebate program because these are in-ground wicking beds. And this is what happens when you work with a client in the way that we do, where it's not a landscape architect just building something and leaving it. We're actually teaching and educating the entire time while we're doing it. So what we have now is a rainwater catchment system that's feeding this bioswale, which is the top of the property, the highest point of the property, and it feeds this one fruit tree that they called the street tree, which is really close to the street. And you have in-ground wicking beds, and a wicking bed is defined as a water reservoir beneath the soil, and the soil mix is such that it's wicking or pulling moisture above into the plant space and the root zones so that you water them less. And so my original design was here, and I was taking a in-ground cistern with an overflow into a wicking bed. So in that tiny little hand-drawn design, you ended up inspiring a client to build their own wicking beds, and they did a masterful, beautiful job. He's not quite finished, and I'm so proud and happy to be a part of that project. I did want to go back and define permaculture because a lot of folks aren't using that word or don't know what that word is. Permaculture is a design science that has 12 steps, and those principles are used in order to work with not only the agriculture, but the culture and all living beings in that environment and community and bioregion. So permaculture to us is inherently spiritual because of the observation that's needed to integrate with Mother Earth. So since we're talking about rainwater catchment, and Paige did a beautiful job of this, it doesn't have to be just in a rainwater catchment. So the rainwater catchment in this design is here, and then it feeds this swale. This is the original drawing that I did for Nicholas and his design. And we skipped some things like the vine arbor and so many different permaculture aspects that you can play with, but we kept a lot of things, which are the percolation pathways, the bioswales. And this one was a very elaborate design, and the folks still just wanted some grass. So you don't always have to cut out grass. You just can be smart about how it's being percolated into the rainwater is being percolated into that grass landscape. This is another design of a wicking bed with the pipe going underneath the soil, and it's done in a keyhole fashion, so it makes it ergonomically efficient for the person. And because we're doing a DIY permaculture presentation, I wanted to just show you my raw hand drawings so that it doesn't feel overwhelming when you're trying to think about and incorporate your designs, because all we actually did was build one wicking bed. Everything else takes time to implement. So you build this vision, this entire vision of your landscape and what the potential is. And then you might not do this section later. You might just keep it here and the rest be grass or whatever. But you have this potential that you can work with. And you start with the most manageable, most affordable, most efficient resource and grow space that you can get confident. And the worst thing is to lose your confidence and say, oh, the whole project won't work. Lastly, we're talking about moving landscape. And usually folks see a downhill slope or an uphill slope as a disadvantage. We in permaculture see that as an advantage. It's a multi-stage advantage. So right here, this design was for a school, and the sidewalk is along the back area where you can't see. So this is actually a bioswale and curb cut, and it's accepting water into a crater garden. This would be dug down into the landscape rather than, this is taking an herb spiral, which is something similar to this design, taking an herb spiral and inverting it to make a crater garden. And this is what you would do in times of drought. Brad Lancaster is famous for doing this in, I think it's Tucson. So it's called crater gardening or bioswales. And so we not just doing one bioswale where it's one crater, we turned it into a spiral with multiple stages of reinforced water catchment. So you don't have to just catch water in a rain barrel, you can catch it in a simple rain garden. This particular design had a massive slope. So if in a large flood event, lots of debris would come and settle here or washes all of this out. We built a rock wall gabion, and this is now similar to what they're doing. Instead of making concrete riverbanks, they're making rock wall riverbanks. So I took that idea and made it into an oogle culture rock wall, so that you have large logs filled with soil so that we can fill and plant all of that, plant into what would be a bench. So you would line this with wood on the top. Children could run and play all over it and not damage anything. And it's providing multi-function, which is catching sediment, growing plants, providing an ecosystem, and absorbing and holding many, many more gallons of water that would otherwise be runoff. So that is an inspirational crater garden, spiral garden with a rock wall gabion. And it doesn't just have to stop at our rainwater. The rainwater is also affecting the well water. So we have to think about that, what we can do with well water. We can use solar. Aquaponics is a wonderful way of growing and conserving water. Gray water systems are wonderful ways of conserving our water systems and beautifying and pulling pollutants, literally pulling pollutants out of the air and the water. And mandala gardens and wicking beds all are a part of our water cycles. And I wanted to show this as an inspiration because this is my main inspiration for permaculture. His name is Max Myers. He's in Northern California. He has this greenhouse attached to his house, so it's passive solar, and he has a solar system and an aquaponics greenhouse inside, and all of the things that are listed here. So he's a true living legend of permaculture design. And it's proof that it can be done. He's been doing this for 20 plus years on a Northern California mountain. And just as our first presenter, Denise, tried to inspire, it's not just one water system, it's all water systems connected. And before I mention anything more about water and talking about design patterns, using these spiraling design patterns also improves the way we think and the way we interact with our garden. If we're thinking in straight lines and direction, things happen differently in the garden. If we think in these circular patterns, we realize everything's coming back to us. Everything's coming back and merging to the ocean. This is in India, the river Ganga. This is in Northern California, where we have some of the most diverse edges. In permaculture, we define this as edges of life. All kinds of micro life and macro life tucked in these corners of our water systems. And we quite literally are water. And I'll use my last few minutes to be a little more esoteric. Water in Sanskrit is defined as a soma tattva. Soma tattva is the irreducible essence of the moon. So similar to some of the inspiring things I was listening to Paige talk about lightning and what water really is, there's no difference between the ocean and the clouds. They know each other. The clouds are only receiving the water that the ocean is giving them, and it comes back down. So the clouds and the sky and the sunlight and the plants are all interconnected through water, and they are aware of what's happening. Mother Earth and the water, Mother Water, are sending us messages. And it's our duty to listen to those messages. We are no different from the water. We're no different from the clouds. We're no different from the plant. The only difference is that we have the ability to destroy or improve the succession of nature. A permaculture designer can take a landscape and in 6 months to a year transform it into a forest. A natural system would take many hundreds of years to transform that landscape into a forest. So we have the ability to do it. I hope this has been inspiring, and that is my time. Thank you so much.
My name is Chris Charles. I work at the Austin Water Conservation Division, and we are going to be talking about some of the conservation landscape rebate programs that we offer there. First of all, we're going to talk about rainwater harvesting. And as you can see here, we are going to be talking about large cisterns, like over 500 gallons, and then also the small rain barrels that you can buy at home improvement stores. So our program, how it works, we offer 50 cents per gallon for non-pressurized systems. That's the rain barrels and what some people call rain barrels and cisterns. And then also $1 per gallon for pressurized system. And that's when you put a pump on it And so a lot of people will put a pump on those systems to either pump it to another part of the property, or they will do something where they will tie it into their irrigation system for those that have irrigation systems. Basically, there's two different ways to apply for this. One is if it is 500 gallons or less, you can install it first and then turn in the application with the receipts. Or if it's over 500 gallons, you need to get pre-approval for that. And then pre-approval consists of just turning in the application with photos of where it's going to sit, a site drawing, system drawing, and an operation and maintenance guide to make sure that you understand how the system works. A lot of people will get them installed but don't even know how to maintain and operate them. That also ties into a cistern fact sheet that Grow Green offers. If you go to their site and under their booklets that they offer, one of them is called Cistern Maintenance, and that's a very, very good reference for those that are taking care of their cisterns. Another requirement for the systems over 500 gallons is a first flush, and that is basically a pipe that grabs the very first flush off the roof to make sure that all that sediment gets collected there before going into your tank. And you may only apply once a year. So if you find that you need more storage capacity, you will have to wait till 12 months later to apply again for that rebate. So enough on rainwater harvesting. The next program we have is the Water Landscape Rebate Program. And what we're trying to do is remove some of that healthy turf grass and replace it with not only native plant beds, but just native and adapted plant beds. Some adapted plants do work just fine over native plants, but we want to make sure that they're not invasive plants. We do not want that installed. We will give $35 for every 100 square feet converted, minimum of 500 square feet, maximum 5,000 square feet for people with larger areas to do that. And there's no turf to turf replacement. Must be converted to plant beds. No artificial turf or gravelscapes. I get this. I have to deny at least half of my applications right now because people want to put in gravel, and that's just not good for Austin and our heat island effect. The heat island that happens over Austin increases when people start taking out their grass and putting in gravel. And there's other complications that we'll talk about later. This is a pre-approval program. It's not do it first and then turn in the paperwork and receipts. You must get pre-approved before starting work. Talking a little bit about the healthy turf grass that I mentioned before, we basically want there to be some kind of remnants of lawn that's being taken care of, either by hand watering, hose watering, or irrigation system. That picture to the far left is basically just clover and dead native grass. And what happens is when people enter this program, they in their hearts believe that they're doing the right thing, but they end up using more water. And it's kind of hard to keep a program in the books at Austin Water if you're using more water than before. So what we do is we look at water use before and water use after the program, and that's why we have that healthy turf grass requirement. If the photos that you turn in do not kind of 50-50 like that middle picture, we'll go do a pre-inspection, or if you can show me that the grass is healthy within the conversion area, I'll work with you there. Other program requirements, and this is, you see these pictures here, that nice decomposed granite going into the streets and down into our storm drains. That's not cool. But other program requirements, the Grow Green plant list is what we sort of use for the plant guide. You can use other plants, but you just have to get them pre-approved beforehand. We ask for you to put 2 to 3 inches of hardwood mulch. There's no more landscape fabric required and no compost required, but we do want you to put in that mulch. Automatic sprinkler systems need to be either capped off or converted to drip in the conversion area. And there's absolutely no new automatic sprinkler systems allowed in the conversion area. There was a couple of people in years past that actually tried to put in their new landscape and realized that it was a big investment, and they were hand watering before, and then they switched over to automatic sprinkler systems. And then I'm seeing no water savings because now they're running their automatic sprinkler system that uses 1,000 gallons every time it runs. that was one of the requirements that we had to change. So no new automatic sprinkler systems. The conversion area must be at least 50% plant cover at maturity. But if you have mature trees already on the property, that requirement can be laxed upon as well. We just don't want people just to clear out the grass, put in mulch, and call it a day. We actually want some plants there for soil stabilization. And of course, no gravel, like I said before. But if you're planning to put in some kind of patio seating area, we allow that. We understand that that might be part of the design for your landscape. So we'll accept 200 square feet of patio seating area there. That was a lot of requirements for that program. And we actually cut out a whole bunch of those requirements, but now we have it in a good place, and people really enjoy that program. They just, because of the economy, wish they had more rebate, and we're trying to work on that. Back to Rainscape. The WaterWise Rainscape rebate program, we give 30 cents square foot for Rainscape, and I'll go over all the things here. You can read the list. Rain gardens, berms, swales, terraces, and porous pavement. It runs the same way as the WaterWise Landscape program, where you get pre-approval first, but there's no grass requirement. You can just basically start making berms and digging swales on your property, and as long as you keep that water on the ground where it can infiltrate on your property, that's what we're sort of shooting for, because the water that stays on your property is going to benefit the trees on your property and will also benefit the water quality in the area. So some nice pictures here we'll go over real quick. Here are some rain gardens. You see how the gutters are sort of situated in a place where the water coming off the roof goes into the rain gardens. They collect, and we would like for it to stay in the rain garden for a maximum of 48 hours because we don't want mosquito issues. So we want that water to sort of seep into the soil as quickly as possible. And if it overflows, we want that water to go back into the way it should go, off your property and into the storm drains. Berms and swales. You'll see some of the landscapers here in town. I know two that are sort of specializing in this kind of work. The swales, they might call them arroyos or something like that. What we're trying to stay away from is when they do these dry creek beds and swales, that we don't want that water to be rushing from the gutter out into the street. We do want it to collect and try to infiltrate onto the property. You can see here somebody created a berm to where the sheet flow of water sort of collects. But if there was ever a major storm event, it would go straight over that berm and into the right place where it needs to go. Rainwater terracing. This is great for people with sloped yards. You're just trying to slow the flow here. You can see in the picture to the left, the house has the rain gutter going down and then into these plant beds. It's a better option to control erosion issues on your property. And then porous pavement. Again, the rain gutter taking that water off the roof and putting it into a place where it can seep into the ground. Not too many people have applied for this, but it is available for people that are interested in doing this. The Landscape Survival Tools for Your Yard program. It used to be the Drought Survival Tools, but we are no longer in a drought. We might have to change the name back this year, depending on if we get rain or not. But for now, we're calling it the Landscape Survival Tools for Your Yard rebate. And I'm just going to go skip over this a little bit because Denise already did a good job talking about aeration and compost. If you buy 2 cubic yards of compost or 2 cubic yards of mulch, these are the flat rates that you get. The minimum amount is 2 cubic yards. If you buy 10 cubic yards, you're not going to get 5 times. You just get that one flat rate. And then lawn aeration, and not liquid aeration. I've been getting some applications recently for liquid aeration. No, this is just for core aeration. You can either get a service to do it, or you can rent out a machine from one of the home improvement stores. This is how it works. You buy it, you keep the receipts, you install it, you take a photo, and you turn in everything all together. But because it's year round now, instead of just the spring season, you must turn in all applicable receipts within 60 days of the first purchase. If you're having some trouble with that, please give me a call. You'll have the contact information on the end, and we'll work with you on that. We just want to make sure that you're not waiting a half a year before doing something else. And then after that, this is important, You cannot apply for this program again for another 3 years. We're trying to get as many people educated on these landscape survival tools as possible. So you'll have to wait another 3 years before you can apply again. A couple other programs here. Laundry to Landscape Rebate Program. This is basically taking the water out of your washing machine and putting it into the ground where there's a mulch basin that sort of helps out the tree that it's going to. You can double dip. So if you're planning to get 2 yards to do this project, you can apply for the landscape survival tools and get that rebate as well. We do have the Hose End Timer Rebate Program where we will help out with the purchase of this. I think it's a maximum of $40 and up to 2 controllers. But if you don't want to do the paperwork, at select Home Depots, they have a quick $8 discount, but you have to go to Home Depot to get that coupon. You don't need to worry about applications because you're going to get that discount right there at the register. For those of you with irrigation systems, I know I've talked at this Grow Green event for a long time now. Not too many people have automatic irrigation systems in the audience, but if you do, we do offer a irrigation upgrade program, which you can take old components out and upgrade it with high efficiency components. We also offer free irrigation evaluations. This is for single family residential that are using more than 25,000 gallons per month or 20,000 gallons in 2 consecutive months. That's a lot of water, folks. That's why these are not really preferred at Austin Water. I know a lot of people that buy new homes are getting these installed or given these as a prize for buying these new homes. Make sure that you know how you're working and they're working efficient. Free stuff, we have soil moisture meters in our office. We also have sunlight calculators and hose end meters at the library. And if they're not at your branch, they can order them and send them there, and within a week, they'll have them there for you. But this is my contact information. If you need any more information, please contact the main line or email me directly and I'll help you find what you need to get for these programs.
If we could have all the presenters come back with their cameras on, that'd be great. And we can hop into our Q&A session. So our first question is for Chris. Is there any rebate for gutters or another mechanism to direct water into cisterns?
The answer would be no. We do not rebate for gutters. When we do the rainwater harvesting program, we are looking at the pipes starting at the gutter and all the pipes that are associated with it, nozzles, first flush stuff, but not the gutters.
Our next one is for Denise. Hey, can you define weed and feed products?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a little confusing. So weed and feed products traditionally it's a combination of fertilizer and pre-emergent herbicide. And so what that means is when you apply this, they sell it like, oh, this is great. You can do 2 things at once. But that pre-emergent herbicide, and the one we are concerned about is atrazine. You put this stuff on your lawn and it creates a barrier, a chemical barrier. If a seed tries to germinate, it won't let it germinate. And we have scientists that do water quality sampling all over Austin, and this has been a few years ago, but we were finding atrazine in 80% of our water quality samples. So it's a combination of herbicide and fertilizer. Now there's organic ones they call weed and feed now, like corn gluten, but the ones that we're concerned about are the ones that have an active ingredient that acts as a herbicide. We want you to avoid that.
The next question is for Paige. We had a couple questions about recommendations on how big a rain tank should be for a single home. How should we select a cistern? What is a good size to price balance, particularly if you like to keep a vegetable plot?
Yeah, trying to size your cistern for your property can be really daunting, and there's so many options out there for cisterns. So that's a super good question. I'm going to pop up a little illustration real fast to just describe sometimes how we look at a whole property for sizing cisterns and how we look at your roof. Everybody's house is different, so there's no one size fits all answer to that.
Yeah, while she's pulling that up, basically, you measure the square footage of the top of your house, and then you base a formula on like an average rainfall. Then it tells you how many gallons you can collect. So there we go.
All right. So this is an example roof in Austin. So that gives you a little bit of a sense. This is larger than what a lot of roofs are in central Austin. But what we look at is we look at the total square footage of sections of the roof that drain to a certain area. So we look at a section that drains to one gutter and how much rainfall is falling on that section. And then we use some pretty simple formulas. We can put the formula in the chat, but there's also like if you want to just off the top of your head, think about for every 1 inch of rainfall that falls on your roof, you're going to be collecting about 0.62 gallons per square foot. So if you have 1,000 square foot roof, about 620 gallons are going to be coming off of that part of your roof during a 1 inch rainfall. So that's a really basic, and we could get more complex than that if we want. So then from there, there's a sweet spot of rainfall in Austin where if you're collecting anywhere from about 1.3 inches up to 3 inches, that's what you want to size your system for. So you've got some wiggle room in the size of your tanks. And in the case of this example system, we've got anywhere from 1,200 to 2,000 gallons can be collected off of this one side of the house. And so then you talk to the homeowner and say, okay, look over here, we can put 2 1,000 gallon cisterns, which is actually pretty big, guys. You guys don't need that much for that side of the house. And you can begin to see the breakdown across your property about how you want to size the cisterns. A really popular size in Austin is a 500 gallon cistern. And here's what it looks like when you stand next to it. A lot of people don't know how big these things are or how small they are, but this is what one looks like when happy homeowners who are collecting lots of water for their beautiful front yard garden have a 500 gallon cistern. Here's a different version of a 500 gallon cistern in a poly tank. And that kind of answers one of your questions about cost. I mean, it can cost tons if you get really fancy ones, or it can cost a pretty basic amount. And what we can do, I think, in resources is give out some links to suppliers that'll help people see what their options are, because there are also shape options and things like that. And then Chris was talking about that cistern help sheet that the city has. It also talks about ways to size and then all of the components involved in a cistern system. So I really encourage you guys to go to the Grow Green website. These resources are also linked to at the raincatcheraustin.org website. Take advantage of the resources that the Grow Green team has been developing over the years, because they can help with questions like that.
Next question is for Tiaga. Can you recommend some books on permaculture?
One would be Gaia's Garden by Toby Hemingway. Another would be Sol Vita by Anna Eady. And of course, the Permaculture Manual, which is by Bill Mollison, one of the people that coined the phrase permaculture. So you can just look up the Permaculture Manual, but I mean, there's hundreds. And usually one needs, just like with Sanskrit and yogic living, they need a medium to really go through the process. When you do a permaculture certification, it's like a 12-day immersion thing. So it's not something that you can just quickly learn. So my suggestion, even if you have the book, is to connect with an individual or a group or a community that is very well versed in that science and learn directly from a human being.
My next question is for Chris. Are there rebates specifically for porous pavement?
Yeah, I think that was more of a statement or than a question, because the WaterWise Landscape rebate includes porous pavement and porous concrete. But like I said, we really don't get that much traction on that aspect of the Landscape rebate.
And there was another question that someone asked about rental for aeration machines. And I just wanted to read out loud in case y'all can't read the chat. Chris pulled up that they are rented by the hour, approximately $75 for 4 hours. So we got that guy. And our next question for Denise and possibly Paige and any of our speakers who want to answer, but we'll start with Denise. Can we talk about good ground cover for a grassy area? I'm specifically interested to know if horse herb or straggler daisy is a good option and how to encourage its growth. But I'm also interested in any info about good ground covers.
Well, I'll start, but I'll let Paige finish or Chris jump in there. My experience with horse herb and straggler daisy are that if you already have it there, it's a great ground cover. All you have to do is mow it. I have it all over on my property, and I don't have to do anything. Now, trying to get it established, I would love Paige to mention that, like, can you mow some of the clippings from existing stuff and drop them into another place? Because it seems to me like it would be hard to get established unless you could buy little containers of it and plant them. So Paige, do you want to talk about planting horse herb versus already having it in existence in your landscape?
Yeah, I can do that. And, there's also, that's a good question to kind of expand on climate, because there are ground covers that work really well in shade and ground covers that work really well in sun. And there's not the same answer to that question. So I've seen horse herb work pretty well in sun to part sun. And I agree with you that it's the easiest to get established if it's already present. And a lot of people spend a lot of time and effort actually trying to remove it. But it's a brilliant ground cover. And just to share an example of that, I just walked out of my home office and took a picture of my side yard, which you can't get a sense of scale, but this is probably 100 feet by 100 feet. And that's only a portion of it. And it's there and it's taking care of itself. And we probably mow it like every 3 weeks, just when it's raining. So when it's not raining, we just kind of let it be and it comes in green and beautiful. It also kind of helps take care of itself by spreading densely. So it helps to choke out what somebody might call weeds. So I like it. You can buy it at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center during the plant sales. I've also seen it at some nurseries that are a combination of the larger nurseries that sell both to the local larger nurseries that sell both to wholesale and retail, like Leaf Landscape has small 4-inch pots. So there are ways that you can get it started. I have not seen anybody seed it. Usually you want to start by clearing a patch where you want it, and then planting it in plugs, and then kind of help it. Same thing you would do with buffalo grass, kind of help it grow in by pulling out some of the weeds that compete until it makes a carpet. Then it likes to take care of itself. Under trees and shade, we see more success with things like sedges. Like there's a short growing one called Weberville sedge, which is a local native growing sedge. It's low growing. You don't mow it at all. So those are nice opportunities for under dense tree canopy where you don't want lawn. You could do some sedge grasses or other low growing ground covers like I can only think of the not very politically correct common term for this one, so I'm not going to say it. Anyway, yes, there are.
Purple heart?
Yes, Purple Heart. Thank you. That's a nice one, and it adds a pretty cool color to your landscape, and it'll spread, and it just comes back bomb-proof year after year. That's an awesome one for shade.
Yeah, and I would also suggest looking in the Native and Adapted Plant Guide, because we do have a section. Sometimes when somebody asks me a question like that, I'm like, oh, I know too many plants, but like lyre-leaf sage is another one that do well in the shade. Verbena, snake herb, those like the sun. So
I'm a big fan of horse herb. So in the sun, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I dropped the link to the plant guide in the chat, and that has a whole section on ground cover, trees, shrubs, on everything. So highly recommend y'all check that out. All right, and we're nearing our last questions and what folks have already asked, and this is for Paige. Can new trees go in rain gardens, or should they be on the side to not get waterlogged?
I love this question. Yes. Yes and yes. Some of them aren't good candidates for being in the rain garden because they don't handle the fluctuation. Like one misconception is that a rain garden is wet all year long, and in Central Texas that's not true. It does go dry. So you need something that's super hardy still. with nice deep roots, but also something that can handle what we call wet feet when there is water sitting in that basin for a day or two right after a rain event. So on the rain garden guide or the cistern guide, it's the rain garden guide. There's a short plant list that talks about trees that are specifically geared toward and like to be in the kind of climate that's inside the rain garden. And we see people planting things like that. There are even some fruit trees that like that kind of setting. I wouldn't go with peaches and things that say needs lots of drainage, but there are fruit trees that like that. And then there are also, and the same thing with all plants, there are tall grasses and hardy wooded plants that like to be down in the rain garden. And then there are some plants that like things that are drier, like rosemary and a lot of your herbs and some of your drought tolerant natives that can be planted on the berm. And there are some trees that prefer things, a drier kind of climate. So we have some resources and lists that help people choose plants for the setting. And you can choose some types of trees for your berms and some types of trees that go well in the rain garden.
I did want to plug a couple different things. If you would like to rewatch this presentation or share it out, we are going to make it available on our Watershed YouTube page, which Cassie has shared in the chat. We would love for y'all to subscribe to that. We put up a bunch of videos. Our department does so many cool things that have to do with creeks. And if you would like to learn more, we put some really neat videos together on that page. We are also working hard to reformulate our strategic plan going forward. We want to make sure that we are incorporating feedback from the community, especially those that we have not listened to or have not included in conversations in the past. And so we are working hard to get as much input as we can from people who care about our creeks and people who live next to creeks and people who interact with our creeks to form our plan going forward. So we have a rain to river survey available online. That shouldn't take too much of your time. That will really, really help us figure out our path forward for watershed protection department. So we would really appreciate if y'all took a look at that. I know someone else mentioned like, hey, how do I share these resources with my friends? growgreen.org is our house for anything sustainable landscaping resources. We have a whole page about free stuff, free rebates, grants, and goodies for all Austin residents to get to help with their landscaping projects. We also have just a ton of information about pretty much any landscaping concept imaginable. And we have a bunch of fact sheets that are written by really smart people who know their stuff. So we really recommend you check that out. So those were my 3 plugs. Denise, anything else?
No, I just want to thank everybody again for participating as speakers, as participants. I did want to mention that Grow Green actually is turning 21 this year. And so we weren't able to celebrate the 20-year anniversary last year. So at the Austin City Council meeting on May 19th, we're going to have a proclamation for the Grow Green program for 20 years. So I'm really proud of that. I've been lucky to have been here for 17 of those. I didn't start the program, but it's just been great. And one last thing I want to say about Grow Green Landscape Professional Training, because I saw some of you guys on there. We're reevaluating that program. I'm going to be calling everybody to see if you guys think we should continue. We're looking for contractors that put in rain gardens and cisterns. So if you are a contractor and interested, definitely get in touch with Paige. I think that's really all I have to say. Tiago, do you have any last words?
Oh, I just wanted to express my gratitude for y'all having me on for the talk. And I'm, just grateful to be participating with everybody. Thanks for the opportunity.
Paige, you want to say anything else?
Tiago said it. I just would love to see everybody getting out and gardening and enjoying water and having a good relationship with their yards and their community. So I'm excited.
Yeah, of course I could do one little plug. No, just if you ever want to have a conversation with me, I'm sincere that I do sell plants at the farmer's market on Sunday in Mueller. And my goal is to have successful gardens and gardeners out there. It's not really to sell anything. So just come and talk to me about it. And then also I'm at Casa de Luz all the time. I built an aquaponics garden there. So y'all come eat with me at Casa de Luz. and talk about gardens. And also the Ladybird Wildflower Center sale is actually happening now. It's on the weekends. So you can get those plants there that you were talking about earlier.
Nice.
Anyway,
nice.
thanks. Gratitude for having me, for sure.
Chris, you want
Likewise.
to wrap us up and add some words of wisdom?
Come to our website. We have lots of money for people that are interested in water conservation. So especially out in the landscape. So please come to our website, check out our programs. Even if they're not for you, please understand how they work and tell your neighbors and friends about them. Thank you.
And we are all available in the future. Our contact information is in there. And yeah, thank you again.